Alrighty, gang, let's see who this phony phantom thief really is. I have no clue who this is. Hello and welcome back to the latest installment of Sailor Moon Studies. Acts 6 and 7 are companion pieces in the sense that they both tangentially relate to the character of Tuxedo Kamen, who up to this point in the series has been a rather ambiguous force within the overall narrative. Well, I believe he was intended to be a rather ambiguous force, but in practice, well, let's save that for the analysis, shall we? And I know I promised both Acts 6 and 7, as they are indeed companion pieces, but I felt separating them into two distinct different videos just made for a better viewing experience. This installment, overall, is going to flow a bit differently than you may be accustomed to. Typically, I tend to follow the narrative as it presents itself, attempt to make some light humor, and discuss topics of interest as they appear. But we are presented with a rather odd situation here, considering there will probably never be another chance to naturally talk about the character again. I mean, let's be honest. It's not like he's going to be doing anything significant in between bouts of mind control. So, consider this the unmasking of Tuxedo Kamen, a joke that probably would have worked better had I stuck with his English name. Up to this point in the narrative, Tuxedo Kamen has had this pseudo-air of mystique, or what in a better way could be described as plot-induced mystery. A person reading the story as it released more than likely had all the answers that these two acts provide about the titular character. And when you're writing a mystery or a mysterious character, that tends to be an issue. So, what exactly happened here? Naoko has previously stated in an interview that one of the inspirations behind the character of Tuxedo Kamen, Captain Harlock. Now, she may have been inspired by the space pirate, but she certainly didn't take any writing cues. But to think Sailor Moon easily could have become a space opera given Naoko's love for the genre. Somehow my life feels robbed of something it never deserved. To all the viewers at home, I want to play a little game with you. Are you ready? This one's going to be real easy. Pretend that you have to describe Tuxedo Kamen to somebody who has no concept of what Sailor Moon is, without describing his costume. Don't worry, you can pause the video, take your time. I know 9/10 of you just screamed the words useless at the top of your lungs. I mean, he's stoic, I suppose. What a grand characterization. I suppose that doesn't really give us any clues as to who Tuxedo Kamen is. Perhaps a more apt question is, what is Tuxedo Kamen? Persona 5 is still popular, isn't it? Yeah, there's a Switch port. I'm gonna make tons of views off this. Let's talk about Phantom Thieves. Phantom Thieves, or Gentleman Thieves as they're more commonly known outside of Japan, are an archetype of characters associated with, as the name implies, theft. Although they usually do so for altruistic means, usually avoiding the use of force. Or just for the thrill of it, but that's not really related to the discussion. So, what does this have to do with Tuxedo Kamen? Well, what was he doing at Osa P in Act 1? Well, he was trying to obtain the illusory silver crystal. By what means exactly? The call to action within this act is Tuxedo Kamen releasing a statement declaring his intent to steal the illusory silver crystal, and that it is, in fact, in Japan. The point remains that despite never being shown stealing or acting as a phantom thief, Tuxedo Kamen is supposed to be one. He just simply isn't. Wikipedia doesn't even have him listed on their short list, and considering he has his own page on the website, just speaks volumes of how poorly this facet of his character is even written. He steals more stuff in the anime than he does in the manga. A point of contention brought up in a previous act that will become a central narrative focus of this one is the allegiance of Tuxedo Kamen. What his motives and alignment truly are, and it just strikes me completely out of left field. Other than alluding towards it, he hasn't given a single indication that he isn't on their side. He's never even uttered an edgy line like, "My intention wasn't to protect you, Sailor Moon, my only interest lies within the illusory silver crystal," which would make the reader question his alliance. We actually never see him commit any crime other than stalking and maybe the occasional trespass. This entire act could have been used as a break from the whole Dark Kingdom shenanigans, and just focus on the Senshi against an elusive Tuxedo Kamen, and have Usagi torn on whether she should pursue him or focus on another objective. After all, she was just named the leader of the group. They could have even kept Tuxedo Kamen's good reputation by having it ultimately not be him but minions of the Dark Kingdom causing mayhem, and he was just in pursuit of the same thing. Are you starting to pick up on how this character flatlined? All in all, Tuxedo Kamen is just a mixed bag of ideas and inspirations that were never really explored in any meaningful way. He has no honor code, no individualistic ideals like Captain Harlock. He commits no crime to live up to being a phantom thief in the veins of Arsène Lupin. And while he is teased as a morally complex character with questionable loyalties, not once does he ever act upon those. His goals and priorities always line up with that of our heroes, except when he's under mind control, which happens more often than it really should. I could keep going, but we still have an act to cover, and I've barely started. So, I guess you're off the hook for the moment now, Chiba. Whew, that was strangely cathartic. Almost as cathartic as talking about some full-color panels. Oh, it must be my birthday, Miss Takeuchi, you shouldn't have. No, really, you shouldn't have. My analytics go down every time I talk about the art. But I can't help myself. Fine, I won't dwell on it for too long. This panel is a direct continuation from the end of Act 5, although Luna has received a significant glow-up within the span of a few seconds. We also see a de-transformation of Sailor Moon into Usagi, which is the first time we see such an occurrence. The Moonstick makes its first colored appearance, although sporting a different palette than most would associate with the artifact, along with some other smaller design changes. Now, I don't know about you, but I sort of enjoy the silver coloring. It's somewhat reminiscent of the previous owner, Queen Serenity, and would make a good royal scepter, especially during an age we will soon know as the Silver Millennium. Yes, the Silver Millennium is a time span, not the name of the Moon Kingdom. Apart from this particular outing, and with the possible exception of one other at the end of the arc, the Moonstick is never really shown colored within its short stay. Although if you were to ask me, it's rather clear that this showing is more or less an outlier and not the intent. The next scepter, the Cutie Moonrod, is depicted as being pink from the offset, and all other appearances of the Moonstick are in fact pink. If Naoko didn't intend on it being pink, she's had several opportunities to rectify the palette choice. But here it is being drawn in pink a few years after release in an official art book, and even Crystal opts to keep it pink for its entire existence. Oh, yeah, I was supposed to keep this short. So Usagi takes the time to acknowledge her new role as the leader of the bunch that know her well, a few days maybe. Makoto knows her at best for 12 hours? Don't worry, they're gonna be best friends. And would you look at that, we still have more art to talk about. Just look how gorgeous this full page spread looks. While not my favorite piece of art to come out of Naoko's title page lineup, even within this particular arc, I'm really not too keen on the over-reliance on yellow. You can hardly even make out Usagi's hair. I know it's a stylistic choice, but it's just a lot of nothing. I really enjoy the elegant dresses the girls are in. I'm always a sucker for that sort of thing. I bought the 25th anniversary CD just for that artwork alone. Overall, a nice piece of art, but nothing too special compared to what's come before it. Luna is back to her old bullshit, as her eyes have miraculously enlarged to that of Japanese mascot proportions, as she finally name-drops the Moonstick, which honestly has a rather unfortunate name in the grand scheme of things. Many of us grew up with a much more grandiose name in the Crescent Moon Wand, which, while a little bit on the nose, carried with it a bit of mystique. Whereas Moonstick is somewhat less mystical, even compared to something as simple as a wand. You know, the basis for the magical girl genre. But there is some pretty nuanced history to the word stick being used within genre, well before Sailor Moon was ever created. I suppose the naming conventions just kind of fell towards tradition at that point. Maybe the word stick just sounds more exotic to Japanese audiences. Whatever the reasoning, the moonstick will be sticking around for the rest of the arc. We are then treated to a shirtless Mamoru waking up from a dream about finding the illusory silver crystal. At this point, Naoko has pretty much tossed out the notion that anyone hasn't deduced the identity of Tuxedo Kamen. It's been spelt out for everyone several times before, so if you aren't on board yet, please get on. The story won't make sense unless you accept that ship has sailed. Tuxedo Kamen has taken an ad out in the aptly named Juban newspaper, chatting about the elusive gemstone. Okay, what? How? Why? Honestly, do they just publish anything? It's not like it's front page news, as we see Luna flipping through the paper, but it's kind of like putting an interview with a guy who claims to have been abducted by aliens in the top stories section. It's just kind of odd. Furthermore, is that supposed to be a drawing of him, or is that a photo he gave them? It doesn't completely reveal his identity like that maskless Sailor Moon over there, but I digress. I guess the paper's better at their job than I thought. Well played, Juban newspaper. Well played. Usagi meets up with the rest of the gang, apart from Rei, who, as we know, goes to a different school. She once again makes a reference to strange dreams, hopefully to clue the reader in on what Mamoru's dreams are in relation to. Speaking of, she conveniently bumps into him, as per usual, and the two of them have their usual routine, well, minus throwing stuff at his head. We do get a cute scene where the other two tease Usagi about Mamoru being her type, and when asked what type of guy they're into, they can only respond with the obvious answer. You may not like it, but that is what the ideal male looks like. Now, I wasn't super active in the whole world scene in the 90s, being a product of that decade and all, so maybe I'm not the most well-versed into the culture of the times, but how many middle schoolers do you honestly expect to have read the paper today? Not even the headlines, but the actual paper. Because it seems the entirety of Juban Middle School now knows about the whole illusory silver crystal thing. And about a page, we do see that it was on TV, and I'm sure that's where most of them got this info from, but then again, it wasn't even front page news. Maybe the front page was discussing the actual crystal and the whole Tuxedo Kamen bit was just a side story. I'm no fictional newspaper editor. We do get a cute shot of Luna operating a phone, however. Seemingly in an attempt to add on to things that really don't make much sense, we see the two remaining Shitenteno, Soisite and Kunzite, watching this unfold on a few different TVs. Aren't they in the Arctic? So these are magic TVs, I suppose? Doesn't Queen Beryl have a magical orb that serves the same purpose? I guess only she gets the HD quality magic ball, everybody else gets the 90s static. So back at Game Center Crown, Luna decides to enlighten all the Senshi, including Rei, about the situation. Now, she talks for a good 6 panels and really doesn't bring much new information to light. It's real bare bones information that we mostly already knew. The illusory silver crystal is an artifact of immense power, although its power is more or less quantified in this interaction. It's stated to be strong enough to destroy an entire planet, or star, my Japanese isn't too good. Either way, it's pretty damn powerful, and it's up to our ragtag group to protect it, and the princess who wields its power. Luna then reveals that she was sent from the moon and name drops the Moon Kingdom. Okay, now we're finally getting somewhere. Sadly, within the confines of what we know as an audience, this is just word soup. The audience simply doesn't know enough to signify the importance. The Senshi are here to protect the Moon Princess from the Moon Kingdom, and that Luna is from the moon. It's really not much to go off of. I mean, it's interesting enough to keep someone engaged, and we're beginning to see that the stakes are beginning to be set and the goal is becoming more clear. But relaying all this info doesn't amount to much without wider context. But I'll admit, what we're given is much better than I'll tell you later. Makes you wonder why Queen Beryl never just stated it's strong enough to blow up a star when asked what the crystal even does, instead of making her look like a complete idiot on the subject a few chapters ago. Our attention is slightly shifted to that of the Sailor V arcade game, where Usagi notices that Sailor V suddenly now has a moonstick of her own, and she starts to think about Sailor V. While I would like to call this foreshadowing, I can't really bring myself to do it. It's more or less just reminding you that Sailor V is a thing, and that she may be relevant later narratively speaking. In other news, it seems that Japan has gone into crystal fever within the short span of time that the public has been made aware of the existence of the illusory silver crystal. Normally I'd say this is just plot contrived. However, this is also the same decade where people would spontaneously break out into dancing the Macarena at the drop of a hat. So, Crystal Fever seems logical to me. Zoisite appears on the news as well, in what I want to say is a disguise, but I don't want to offend him. He's the commander of Europe, after all. The television interviewer also looks like Kenji Tsukino. He works for a magazine, but you can't deny the resemblance. Using this television interview, Zoisite is able to make anybody watching the program have to search for the illusions of crystal, while simultaneously draining them of their life energy. Yeah, sure, whatever. Could have used that trick earlier, saved us a lot of time. The Dark Kingdom really doesn't utilize their resources efficiently, do they? Ame and Luna happen to be in close proximity while most of this is going down. Now, why Luna left Usagi when she knew full well that Usagi was acting strange is just beyond me. Ami deduces that this must be some sort of attack from the enemy, and Luna brings her back to Game Center Crown. Luna then proceeds to start talking in moon runes, and no, I'm not being insensitive, I just really can't tell what language this is supposed to be. Like, it could be completely made up, but the fact that they were altered in subsequent releases makes me feel like I'm missing something obvious. Naoko uses ancient languages at different points within the story, so it's really hard for me to tell, but if you know if this is an actual language, please let me know. I spent a few hours looking. Anyhow, Luna and Ame enter... What is this place even called? You see, I've always called it the Moon Command Center, but that name doesn't show up anywhere. The wikis seem to all call it something different as well. Either headquarters or secret base, so I suppose it's really up to preference. I'll have no other opportunity to say this, but Game Center Crown was actually based off a real location, which used to be a pachinko hall. The building's actually still around. It's been turned into a McDonald's these days, so it's not really a moony tourist spot. Maybe I should call the base the play place. McMooney's? Look, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't show up all too often. Seemingly, the air is cleaner down in the basement, or it dispels evil magic, as Ame becomes perfectly fine once arriving downstairs. Luna and her begin to talk about the situation and pinpoint the source of the bad vibes which are radiating from Tokyo Tower. Usagi, under this influence, suddenly collapses. She's then spotted by a passing Mamoru, who is unaffected, mind you, whose warm embrace restores her energy. It's at this particular point where the whole Tuxedo Kamen thing gets a bit too complicated for me. You see, there's often some debate as to what exactly Tuxedo Kamen is. There's a few distinct camps of thought, none of which are really correct. You see, there's one camp that thinks that Tuxedo Kamen is essentially just a dude in a tuxedo, running around giving out pep talks, which I think mostly stems from the anime on the most surface level, but by the manga's own admission, the whole outfit can be taken off and damaged even. We see it draped across the couch, so it's seemingly not a transformation. And yet we're presented with this scene in particular. The miraculous fastest costume change in history, even his tie changes. And as somebody who used to wear a lot of bow ties, those things don't really fold easy. It's also implied that while Tuxedo Kamen is stalking the streets, Mamoru really isn't the one piloting the ship, as it were. He also possesses limited magical capabilities, although that's its own thing entirely. But to claim he has his own Senshi transformation is just not a valid assumption either, as his is just so fundamentally different from the established rules of the series. The author's own unstated rule against men being Senshi aside. We never see Sailor Moon fishing her boots out of the closet now, do we? His transformation into Tuxedo Kamen seems intrinsically linked to Usagi, yet it's implied he's been doing this for some time before she awakened as the pretty soldier. These contradictions are one of the reasons people are still divided on this subject. Just what is Tuxedo Kamen? He plays such an important role within the narrative, yet we know next to nothing about him, really. Tuxedo Kamen tells Usagi to transform into Sailor Moon, and we get a fantastic shot of the transformation on full display, while the rest of the Senshi are in pursuit of Zoisite. Sailor Moon picks this time to have an existential crisis, however, stating that she doesn't have any special abilities like the others do, and she's just useless. Excuse me, but have we been reading the same manga, Usagi? You are literally the only one who does anything for the most part. If you aren't delivering the killing blow, either inspired the others to do it or aided in some particular way. 2 chapters ago, you shot a laser out of your tiara. I realize she's feeling doubt in herself over her ability to assist in a real back-to-the-wall situation. The pressure of being the leader has finally dawned on her and she's caving. It's a fantastic character moment, and perhaps the best usage of the moon mask thus far. At her lowest point, Tuxedo Kamen swoops in and reassures her that she can do it. And with the moonstick now in tow, Sailor Moon miraculously revives everyone who is under the influence of the Dark Kingdom's spell. After performing such a feat, she seemingly passes out from exhaustion as Tuxedo Kamen whisks her away, back to his bedroom. I know, I suppose there's no other place for him to take her. But after the whole masquerade incident, people are really going to be doubting your intentions, my guy. Sailor Moon awakens in a bed with a moon face pocket watch, which is an actual thing. Noticing it must be Tuxedo Kamen's before she decides to turn back to her regular form. We end this particular chapter on a bit of a cliffhanger as we see Mamoru and Usagi meeting each other for the first time, understanding who each other actually are. Sadly, that's all I have for you for Act 6. Next time, with his identity fully exposed, we can begin to analyze the character of Mamoru Chiba. Until then, I hope you all enjoyed this video and you will join me for our next study session. Until then, yours truly, Senpai.